The house, with its manicured lawn and pristine shutters, belonged to Thaddeus and Valencia Blackwood, a couple who seemed to have mastered the art of the American dream. At 37, Thaddeus carried himself with the calculated precision of his profession, his tall frame and prematurely graying temples lending him an air of distinction that commanded respect in Boston's financial district. Valencia, 35, possessed a graceful intensity that turned heads at their neighborhood gatherings, her amber eyes and high cheekbones hinting at mixed European ancestry that she never discussed. Their neighbors knew them as the perfect professional couple. Thaddeus's position as a senior investment manager and Valencia's role as a pharmaceutical researcher meant they were rarely home during daylight hours. Their matching Mercedes-Benz vehicles left the driveway at precise times each morning, returning after sunset to disappear into their three-car garage. The Blackwoods' decision not to have children raised few eyebrows in their social circle. It was 2002, after all, and their generation increasingly chose career success over family life. When asked about it at neighborhood functions, Valencia would smile enigmatically and say they were focusing on their careers and enjoying their freedom to travel. Their friends envied their lifestyle: weekend trips to Europe, summer homes in exclusive locations, and dinner parties that became the talk of their social set. But beneath the polished exterior lay a void that neither their professional achievements nor their material wealth could fill. The carefully maintained lawn, the designer furniture, the expensive art pieces, all served as elaborate props in a performance of perfection that was beginning to crack under its own weight. As autumn painted the neighborhood in brilliant shades of red and gold, no one suspected that behind those pristine walls, a darkness was growing. The Blackwoods' perfect life masked a twisted reality that would eventually lead to headlines, horror, and bloodshed. Their story would become a cautionary tale about the depths of human depravity and the prices paid for unspeakable desires. Born into upper-middle-class families, both Thaddeus and Valencia followed meticulously plotted paths to success. Thaddeus grew up in Connecticut, the only child of a tax attorney and a real estate agent. His childhood was a series of private schools and summer camps, each carefully chosen to maximize his future prospects. At Dartmouth, he distinguished himself not through social connections, but through ruthless efficiency and analytical precision. Valencia's background proved more complex. Raised in Rhode Island by academic parents, she demonstrated an almost obsessive interest in chemistry from an early age. Her father, a physics professor, and her mother, a biochemist, cultivated her interests with single-minded determination. By 16, she was taking college-level courses at MIT. She quickly earned a reputation as a brilliant but solitary figure, more comfortable with laboratory equipment than human interaction. Their paths crossed at a pharmaceutical investment conference in 1995. Thaddeus, already making waves at his firm, attended to scout potential investments in biotech startups. Valencia presented research findings that promised to revolutionize drug delivery systems. During the coffee break, they found themselves discussing the intersection of science and profit with an intensity that surprised them both. Their courtship progressed with the same efficiency that marked their professional lives. Within 6 months, they married in a small ceremony in Vermont, attended only by immediate family and a select few colleagues. Their honeymoon consisted of a series of meetings with European investors, punctuated by expensive dinners and brief tourist excursions. The decision to remain childless came naturally to both. Valencia viewed pregnancy as an unnecessary biological disruption to her career trajectory. Thaddeus, though he never admitted it openly, felt relieved at avoiding the messiness and emotional demands of parenthood. They focused instead on building their empire, a showcase home in Wellesley, carefully planned vacations, and strategic social connections. For 7 years, their partnership functioned like a well-oiled machine. They maintained separate bank accounts alongside their joint ones, divided household responsibilities with corporate efficiency, and supported each other's career advancement with calculated precision. Their sex life, while not passionate, served its purpose as a physical release and marital obligation. But by 2002, cracks began appearing in their perfect facade. The achievement of their material goals left them feeling strangely empty. Their conversations grew shorter, more functional. Dinners became silent affairs, punctuated only by the clink of expensive silverware on fine china. They had everything they'd planned for, yet something vital was missing. The void made itself known in quiet moments, when they sat in their perfect living room, surrounded by expensive furnishings that felt increasingly meaningless, or during their regular dinner parties where they performed the roles of perfect hosts while feeling increasingly disconnected from their guests and each other. Valencia noticed Thaddeus spending more time in his home office, late at night, the blue glow of his computer screen visible under the door until early morning hours. Thaddeus observed Valencia becoming more withdrawn, her work hours growing longer, her responses to his questions increasingly distant. They needed something to reignite their connection, to make them feel alive again, something beyond the ordinary experiences that money could buy. Something forbidden. The descent into darkness began with a seemingly innocent late-night internet search. Thaddeus, restless after another silent dinner, found himself exploring the darker corners of the web. His financial expertise had taught him about cryptocurrency and its shadowy applications. Using his work laptop and a private VPN, he began navigating encrypted networks and hidden forums. Initially, he justified his exploration as research. Understanding the underground economy could benefit his investment strategies. But as weeks passed, his searches grew more focused, more specific. He discovered forums where wealth bought access to experiences beyond the mainstream market, where everything and everyone had a price. Valencia first noticed the change in his behavior during their morning routine. His usual stoic demeanor showed hints of excitement, a spark she hadn't seen in years. When he finally shared his discoveries with her, she surprised both him and herself with her response. Instead of horror or disgust, she felt curiosity. Her scientific mind began analyzing possibilities, risks, and methods. Together, they spent their evenings exploring this shadow world. Valencia applied her research skills to understanding its infrastructure. Thaddeus used his financial acumen to establish secure payment methods. They created elaborate spreadsheets analyzing risks and contingencies, approaching their dark plans with the same methodical precision they applied to their careers. Their wealth and professional backgrounds proved advantageous. Thaddeus established a complex network of offshore accounts and cryptocurrency wallets. Valencia researched methods of control and containment, applying her pharmaceutical knowledge to new purposes. They convinced themselves their approach would be different, more sophisticated, more humane than the crude methods they read about in news stories. The transformation of their basement began subtly, a security system upgrade here, a structural reinforcement there. They hired different contractors for each modification, ensuring no single worker could grasp the full scope of their projects. Their professional reputations deflected any potential suspicion. Who would question home improvements by such a respectable couple? As summer turned to fall, their plans took final shape. Using dark web connections, they made contact with traffickers operating between West Africa and Europe. Their requirements were specific: young, educated, with no immediate family. The negotiations, conducted through encrypted channels, felt almost like legitimate business transactions. Almost. They justified their actions in whispered conversations. They would provide comfortable conditions, they told themselves. Their wealth would ensure a level of luxury even in captivity. It wasn't about cruelty, they insisted, but about exploring forbidden desires in a controlled environment. Their victim would want for nothing except freedom. As their plans progressed, both Thaddeus and Valencia noticed subtle changes in their relationship. The silences at dinner became charged with shared secrets rather than emptiness. They began touching more frequently, small gestures of complicity. Their growing excitement masked any moral qualms, replacing them with anticipation of the power they would soon wield. On October 15, 2002, a nondescript delivery van pulled into the Blackwoods driveway at 2:17 a.m. The rain provided perfect cover, muffling sounds and deterring any curious neighbors. Adna arrived semi-conscious, drugged for the final leg of her journey from Lagos. At 19, she had believed she was accepting a scholarship to study in America. Reality would prove far more horrific. Valencia supervised the transfer, her researcher's detachment, allowing her to treat the situation like a laboratory delivery. The traffickers, speaking only in hurried whispers, helped move Adana to the basement. Thaddeus handled the payment. Cryptocurrency transferred through a cascade of digital wallets he'd spent months setting up. The basement space barely resembled its original form. High-end furnishings and expensive finishes masked its true nature as a prison. The renovations had created a self-contained apartment complete with a bathroom and small kitchen area, but the reinforced doors, soundproofed walls, and sophisticated surveillance system revealed its true purpose: a golden cage designed to contain their living acquisition. As consciousness returned, Adana found herself in surroundings that seemed to mock her situation. Egyptian cotton sheets on a queen-sized bed, a flat-screen television mounted on the wall, a bookshelf filled with contemporary novels. All the comforts of wealth contained within a space she could never leave. The Blackwoods had planned every detail meticulously. Valencia established a feeding schedule based on her knowledge of human biology and psychology. Thaddeus created organizational systems for their new routine, treating it like any other project management challenge. They developed codes and signals for communicating about their secret when others were present. During those first days, they maintained their normal schedules with robotic precision. Thaddeus left for his office downtown at exactly 7:30 a.m. Valencia worked from her home laboratory, monitoring their captive through hidden cameras. They hosted a dinner party that weekend, their guests sipping wine directly above where Adana lay imprisoned. The couple's excitement manifested in different ways. Thaddeus became more aggressive in his business dealings, riding a wave of power that spilled over from their secret activities. Valencia approached their captive with clinical curiosity, taking notes on behavioral responses and physical reactions as if conducting research. But they had miscalculated one crucial factor. Their victim was not the uneducated, helpless girl they had expected. Adna had completed 2 years of psychology studies at the University of Lagos. Behind her seemingly compliant exterior, she began observing her captors with the same analytical precision they applied to her. She noticed their patterns, their weaknesses, their growing tensions. As October drew to a close, the Blackwoods settled into what they imagined would be their new normal. They had achieved something few others would dare attempt. Their perfect life now contained an element of danger that made them feel truly alive. But they failed to recognize that they had invited destruction into their carefully ordered world. Life in the Blackwood household developed new rhythms around their dark secret. Each day followed a carefully orchestrated schedule that Valencia had developed using project management software. Feeding times, hygiene periods, and their own private visits were logged with scientific precision. They maintained spreadsheets tracking everything from Adana's food preferences to her menstrual cycle. The basement became their sanctuary and prison, not just for their captive, but increasingly for themselves. They found themselves drawn there more frequently, their normal social activities feeling pale and meaningless in comparison. Their interactions with Adana evolved from purely physical to something more complex, a twisted form of domestic life that satisfied their need for control while feeding their growing obsession. Valencia began working from home more often, citing a new research project that required constant monitoring. In reality, she spent hours watching the security feeds, analyzing every movement, every gesture. Her professional work suffered, but the thrill of their secret life compensated for any career setbacks. Thaddeus developed new patterns too. He started leaving work early, making excuses about client meetings that never existed. His colleagues noticed changes in his behavior, a new intensity in his eyes, occasional lapses in his usually impeccable attention to detail. During meetings, his mind would drift to their basement, to the power they wielded over another human being. Close calls became part of their daily existence. A package delivery requiring a signature, while Adana could be heard showering, a neighbor's dog that kept barking at their basement windows. Each incident sent their hearts racing, adding an edge of danger that both thrilled and terrified them. But maintaining their secret took its toll. Valencia developed insomnia, spending long hours pacing their bedroom while Thaddeus slept. Her hands began to shake slightly when handling laboratory equipment. Thaddeus started drinking more heavily, needing alcohol to quiet the thoughts that raced through his mind during quiet moments. Their relationship shifted too. The initial excitement of shared transgression gave way to subtle blame and resentment. They argued about small details, whose turn it was to bring meals downstairs, whether the surveillance system needed upgrading, how to handle upcoming social obligations. Meanwhile, Adana watched and learned. Her psychology training helped her understand the dynamic between her captors. She noticed how Valencia's hands trembled slightly when delivering meals, how Thaddeus's voice changed pitch when he was lying to his wife. She observed their growing carelessness. A door left unlocked, a security code entered where she could see it, conversations held just within her hearing. The Blackwoods' perfect facade began showing cracks. To the outside world, they declined more social invitations, made excuses for missed appointments. Their usual immaculate appearance slipped occasionally, Valencia appearing at the grocery store in wrinkled clothes. Thus, forgetting to shave before important meetings, their neighbors noticed small changes too. Unusual delivery vans arriving at odd hours, new security cameras appearing around the property, and the Blackwoods' growing reluctance to allow service workers into their home. But in their wealthy enclave, privacy was respected and questions remained unasked. As winter approached, the pressure continued building. Valencia caught herself talking to the security monitors late at night, holding one-sided conversations with Adana's image. She developed a habit of checking and rechecking the basement locks, sometimes returning home from work multiple times to ensure everything was secure. Their captive observed these deteriorating patterns with growing interest. Each slip in their perfect routine, each small mistake in their security protocols, became a piece in the puzzle she was slowly assembling. While the Blackwoods focused on maintaining their secret, they failed to notice the changing dynamic within their carefully constructed prison. The unraveling began on a stormy November night. Valencia had been increasingly careless with security protocols, her scientific precision eroded by months of strain. That evening, she forgot to reactivate the basement door alarm after delivering dinner, a small oversight that would prove catastrophic. Earlier that day, Thaddeus had made a critical error at work, misplacing a decimal point that cost his clients millions. His boss had called him into the office, questioning not just the mistake, but his recent pattern of distraction. He arrived home in a dark mood, carrying an expensive bottle of scotch from his office collection. The couple's argument started over something trivial. Valencia had forgotten to pick up his dry cleaning, but years of suppressed tension quickly transformed the disagreement into something uglier. Their voices echoed through the house, creating a cacophony that covered the slight sound of a basement door opening. Adana had spent months preparing for this moment. During her captivity, she had carefully cataloged every detail of their routine, every weakness in their security. She had maintained a compliant demeanor while secretly building her strength, hiding small portions of food to keep her mind sharp and her body ready. The kitchen knife she had managed to conceal weeks earlier, during one of Valencia's increasingly frequent moments of carelessness, felt cold against her skin. Adana had chosen it carefully, waiting for the perfect opportunity to slip it from the block when Valencia was distracted by one of her many phone calls. As the argument upstairs reached its crescendo, Adana moved silently through the house she had only seen through glimpses and security camera feeds. The layout, memorized from overheard conversations and the sound of footsteps above, was clear in her mind. She knew exactly where the Blackwoods would be, in their study, where they always retreated during their increasingly frequent arguments. The study door stood partially open, warm light spilling into the hallway. Inside, Thaddeus stood with his back to the door, gesturing wildly with a crystal tumbler of scotch. Valencia sat at her desk, her face buried in her hands. Neither noticed the shadow that slipped into the room. What followed happened with surprising speed. Thaddeus noticed her first, his eyes widening in shock as he turned. The tumbler slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Valencia looked up at the sound, her scream caught in her throat as Adana moved with the precision her captors had once prided themselves on. The knife found its mark twice before either of them could react, once in Thaddeus's abdomen, once in Valencia's shoulder as she lunged forward. Not fatal wounds, but enough to incapacitate. Adana had studied human anatomy during her psychology courses, knowledge that served her well in this moment of desperate action. Blood spread across the imported Persian rug as the Blackwoods collapsed. Valencia tried to reach for her phone, but found her arm wouldn't respond. Thaddeus attempted to stand, but slipped in the mixture of blood and spilled scotch. Their perfect world, literally and figuratively, shattered around them. Adna took Valencia's phone, her hands steady as she dialed 911. She spoke clearly, giving the address and describing the situation. Then she walked out the front door into the rain, waiting on the front steps for the authorities to arrive. The same surveillance cameras that had monitored her captivity now recorded her calm demeanor as police cars and ambulances converged on the property. In those final moments before the sirens arrived, she stood in the rain, letting it wash away months of captivity behind her. Through the open door, she could hear the Blackwoods' moans of pain mixing with the sound of thunder. Their carefully constructed fantasy had crumbled, destroyed not by external discovery, but by their own growing carelessness and the quiet strength of the woman they had underestimated. The case broke like a thunderclap across affluent Wellesley. Police cruisers and crime scene tape transformed Oakmont Drive into a media circus. Neighbors emerged from their colonial homes in bathrobes and slippers, watching in stunned disbelief as stretchers carried the bleeding Blackwoods to waiting ambulances. Detective Raina Patel took lead on the investigation, her methodical approach perfectly suited to unraveling the complex web of evidence. The Blackwoods house yielded a treasure trove of documentation: Valencia's meticulous notes on their captive, Thaddeus's elaborately concealed financial records, and hours of surveillance footage that would later prove crucial in prosecution. The basement told its own story. High-end furnishings couldn't disguise the essential nature of the space as a prison. CSI teams discovered Valencia's fingerprints on sedative bottles, Thaddeus's DNA on restraints hidden in custom cabinets. Their attention to detail in concealing their crimes would ultimately serve as evidence against them. Both Blackwoods survived their injuries, though Thaddeus needed extensive surgery. As they recovered under police guard at Massachusetts General Hospital, their carefully constructed lives began unraveling. Their employers immediately terminated their positions. Social connections evaporated overnight. Former friends gave interviews expressing shock and denial, all claiming they never suspected anything amiss. Adna's testimony proved devastating. Her psychology background lent additional weight to her account of the psychological torture she endured. She described their methods with clinical precision, her composed demeanor on the witness stand making her story even more compelling. The jury listened in horror as she detailed how the Blackwoods had combined their professional expertise, Valencia's pharmaceutical knowledge, and Thaddeus's financial acumen to enable their crimes. The investigation expanded internationally, uncovering links to trafficking networks across 3 continents. Thaddeus's financial records led authorities to other wealthy clients, triggering investigations in multiple countries. The case became a watershed moment in human trafficking enforcement, highlighting how wealth and respectability could mask monstrous crimes. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The prosecution presented 1,247 pieces of evidence, including Valencia's notebooks, which provided damning documentation of their crimes. Their defense attorneys attempted to portray them as mentally ill, but their methodical planning undermined any claims of insanity. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The sentencing hearing drew national media attention. Judge Helena Rodriguez delivered a scathing condemnation before sentencing them each to 30 years without possibility of parole. The Blackwoods' final public appearance showed them in prison jumpsuits, their former elegance stripped away, revealing the hollow shells beneath. Adna emerged from the experience with remarkable resilience. Using portions of the civil judgment awarded to her from the Blackwoods' seized assets, she established a foundation helping trafficking survivors rebuild their lives. Her story became a powerful testimony to human strength and dignity in the face of unspeakable cruelty. The house on Oakmont Drive stood empty for years, its value plummeting despite the prestigious address. Eventually, a developer purchased it for demolition, erasing the physical reminder of what had happened there. But the case left indelible marks on the community's psyche, shattering illusions of safety and innocence in their privileged enclave. Today, the case is studied in criminal justice programs across the country. It serves as a cautionary tale about the masks people wear, the evil that can hide behind respectable facades, and the danger of assuming wealth and social status guarantee moral character. The Blackwood's fall from grace became a stark reminder that true character reveals itself not in public gestures or professional achievements, but in the choices made behind closed doors. For Wellesley residents, every perfect couple, every showcase home, every manicured lawn now carries a shadow of doubt. They learned that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are not the obvious ones, but those who hide in plain sight, attending neighborhood gatherings and charity functions while harboring dark secrets behind their pleasant smiles and prestigious addresses.